I never thought betrayal could look so casual, like a smiling photo on social media. My name is Martha Jenkins, and the day my daughter-in-law posted our perfect family picture, she drew a red circle around my face and asked her followers, "If you could erase one person from this family, who would it be?" Hundreds laughed. She laughed the loudest. In that moment, I realized I hadn't just been excluded from a photo, I'd been erased from my own family. And while she mocked me for the world to see, I sat in silence, holding the deed to the house she lived in, the one she'd claimed as hers. That was the moment something inside me broke, and something far stronger took its place. I remember that morning too vividly to ever forget it. The smell of coffee still clung to the air, warm and familiar, right before the world tilted beneath me. My phone buzzed on the counter, just another notification, or so I thought. A photo filled the screen, all of us smiling in what looked like a picture-perfect family portrait. David stood tall in his gray suit, Emma and Josh in front, their teenage smiles polished for the camera, and Stephanie, always camera-ready, anchored the center with her signature glow. And then there was me, standing slightly to the side, cropped by the frame, like an afterthought. My eyes caught the detail that stole my breath, a thick red circle drawn around my face, and a caption that read, "If you could erase one person from this picture, who would it be? I think you know my choice." For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. The comments came pouring in, sharp, gleeful, poisonous. Definitely the old lady. Time for the nursing home. The family would be perfect without her baggage. Each one landed like a slap. But what cut deeper were the reactions that followed. Stephanie's laughing emojis, her hearts, her casual cruelty disguised as humor. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel anger at first. What I felt was a hollow quiet spreading through me, the kind that comes when you realize something precious has died, only it's not a person. It's the place you held in someone's life. And then, in the middle of that chaos, a single comment appeared from a stranger. "That's someone's mother. How would you feel if your daughter-in-law posted this about your mom?" Stephanie's reply came fast. "Some mothers-in-law earn their place in the family. Others just expect it." I set my coffee down. My hands were steady. But something inside me, patience, kindness, fear of being alone, crumbled into dust. I opened the comment box. My thumbs hovered for only a second before I typed, "The house you're living in isn't your husband's. It's mine, and I just voted to erase you from my property." I pressed send. The silence in my apartment cracked under the sound of my own heartbeat. Within minutes, the post exploded. Neighbors whispering, phones lighting up, messages flooding in. But I didn't stay to watch. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to the house, my house, the one where I'd spent years pretending to be a guest. The front yard looked the same. The white porch, the trimmed hedges, the life I'd built but no longer belonged to. I parked outside, went to the trunk, and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside, neatly folded under old photographs, was the deed. My name, written in blue ink, was still clear across the page. I ran my finger over it, remembering the day Frank told me, "Put it in your name, just to be safe." He was right. That safety would now become my weapon. And for the first time in years, I wasn't the one erased. I was the one holding the pen. I still remember the first time I stepped into that house 12 years ago, back when everything felt simple, when family still meant trust. It was over dinner one night. David was talking about how impossible the housing market had become. "Mom, the market's insane. We can't qualify for anything decent." Frank looked up from his plate and said quietly, "We could help with a down payment." But I had another thought. Or we could buy it outright, I said. Let them rent until they're stable. It seemed practical, generous, what parents do when they see their children struggling. So we did. We found a modest but beautiful home, signed the papers, and put it in my name. Simple, sensible, safe. When I handed them the keys, Stephanie hugged me so tightly I could feel her heartbeat. Her eyes glistened when she said, "Thank you. Mom Martha, we'll make you proud." And for a long time, I believed her. But words change as easily as the people who speak them. At first, she told people. David's mother helped us buy this house. A year later, it became, David's mother gave us some money for it. And by the 5th year, I'd hear her say, smiling, David bought this house right after our wedding. I said nothing. It felt small to correct her. Let them have their pride, I thought. Then Frank passed away. The house, once full of noise, felt too big, too hollow. I packed my things and moved into a small apartment nearby. When David insisted on paying rent, I told him, no rent. Your family. It sounded loving at the time, a mother's way of giving without keeping score. But I didn't realize I'd signed an invisible contract, one that stripped me of respect in my own story. Years later, that generosity became their entitlement. One afternoon, I stopped by to drop off a birthday gift for Emma. The house looked different. New furniture, new paint, as if time itself had erased my fingerprints from the walls. When I rang the doorbell, Stephanie opened the door, surprise flashing across her face before settling into polite irritation. Could you call before dropping by, Martha? We're trying to keep things organized. Her voice was smooth, practiced, like a woman talking to a neighbor, not to the woman who bought the roof over her head. There was no Mom Martha, just Martha now. She smiled, but her eyes avoided mine, and I understood. Somewhere along the line, I had been gently escorted out of my own place in the family. I left the gift on the counter, said goodnight, and walked back to my car in silence. The porch light flickered on behind me, casting my shadow across the lawn, thin, fading, almost transparent. That night, I sat alone in my apartment and realized the cruelest kind of loss doesn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It comes quietly, disguised as good manners, until one day you wake up and realize you're a guest in a house you once called home. When I thought it couldn't hurt more, my phone rang. David's name lit up the screen, and for a fleeting moment, I believed he would defend me. I imagined his voice trembling with anger, maybe guilt. Mom, I can't believe Stephanie did that to you. But when I answered, his tone was clipped, distant. Mom, what you commented on Stephanie's post was inappropriate. The words sank in slowly. David, did you even see what she posted? It was a joke. Mom, you're taking it too seriously. A chill crept up my spine. A joke. That's what humiliation was now. Content, engagement, laughter for strangers. He sighed into the phone, the way he used to when he was 10 and didn't want to admit he'd done something wrong. But this wasn't a child's mistake. This was a man choosing silence over truth. I steadied my voice. David, I do own your house. There was a pause, long enough for both of us to hear everything we hadn't said over the years. Then his answer came, bitter and certain. You bought it for us. It's been our home for over a decade. My throat tightened. Yes, I said quietly. Your home. In my house. He exhaled hard, a sound that carried more resentment than grief. What exactly are you threatening to do? I didn't answer. I just ended the call and stared at the blank screen, the reflection of my face faint in the glass. For the first time in my life, I didn't recognize the son I had raised. I set the phone down and sat there in the stillness, realizing I had just been exiled from my own family with a single conversation. That day, I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was an intruder, politely evicted by the people I'd given everything to. The next morning, I drove to Robert Patterson's office, the same man who'd handled Frank's estate all those years ago. The moment I stepped inside, I was met with the familiar scent of oak and old paper, quiet, steady, dependable. It reminded me of Frank, sitting in that very chair across from Robert, insisting we put the house in my name just to be safe. Robert looked up from his desk, his round glasses catching the light. "Martha, I heard about the post. I'm sorry, but tell me, why are you here today?" I placed the deed on the desk between us, the folded edges soft from time, because I want to know exactly what my rights are. He studied the document carefully, page by page, like a man inspecting something sacred. "Your husband was meticulous," he finally said. "Everything's in your name: deed, insurance, taxes. You are the sole owner." I nodded, though inside I felt nothing but an empty calm. "So legally, I can ask them to leave?" "You can," he said slowly, "but it'll tear the family apart." "Robert," I said, managing a small smile. "I didn't tear this family apart. I just stopped pretending it was whole." He leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen against the desk. Then, almost reluctantly, he pulled another file from the cabinet. "There's something else you should know." He opened the folder, flipping through a few yellowed pages. "When Frank inherited from his mother, he didn't just receive cash, he also established a trust fund for David. You're listed as the administrator." I froze. "How much?" "A little over $400,000. It's been quietly growing for 12 years. I stared at him, speechless. A fund meant to secure David's future, yet he'd been living as though I had nothing, as though the woman holding his inheritance meant nothing at all. When I left the office, the air outside felt sharper, cleaner. I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear. There are battles you don't fight with weapons. You fight them with truth and paperwork. As I drove home, a thought began to form. A plan, fragile but real. The kind of plan built not on revenge, but on justice. That afternoon, I called Carol, my neighbor, who had seen more than anyone realized. "Carol," I asked, "has Stephanie bought anything fancy lately?" "Oh, absolutely," she said without hesitation. "Just last week she was showing off that Louis Vuitton purse, said it was from a bonus check for selling a house." I almost laughed. Stephanie had sold 3 houses in 2 years, hardly enough to pay her credit card interest, let alone for luxury. When I hung up, I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. A long list of tiny, regular charges stared back at me. $30 here, $50 there, sometimes $75. They looked harmless until I noticed the pattern. Every charge traced back to accounts connected to Stephanie's email. My hands didn't shake. Not this time. I wrote down every date, every amount, every merchant. Then I took screenshots, hundreds of them, and sent them all to Robert. As I closed the computer, I felt my pulse steady for the first time in weeks. The rules of the game had just changed. I called Stephanie that afternoon. Her voice came through the phone, sugary sweet, dripping with practiced charm. "Oh, Martha, I was just about to call you. We need to talk about the house situation." "Yes," I said calmly. "We do." She spoke quickly, rehearsed. "David and I want to make things right. We're ready to pay you fair rent starting immediately." I looked at the credit card statement spread across my table, the evidence of every small theft, every deceitful indulgence. "How generous of you," I said lightly. "But tell me, Stephanie, how do you plan to pay that rent?" Silence. I don't know what you mean. I said, keeping my voice steady, you've sold only 3 houses in 2 years. David makes $60,000 a year, yet you post about designer bags, spa weekends, and luxury dinners. Tell me, which account are those charged to? The air on the other end went still, like the moment before a storm breaks. Those charges, I can explain those. I'm sure you can, I said softly. Just like you can explain the $8,000 charged to my credit card over the last 2 years. The silence stretched so long I could hear my own breathing. Then, finally, her voice, small, trembling, stripped of arrogance. Martha, I never meant to. You never meant to get caught. I interrupted. There's a difference. I ended the call before she could reply. For the first time in months, the weight in my chest lifted. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I felt my pulse again. Steady. Alive. Resolute. That night, I opened Frank's old notebook, the one filled with his looping handwriting. Between pages of budgets and family notes, a line caught my eye. If you ever feel erased, Martha, remember, the truth has longer legs than lies. I smiled through the blur of tears. Tomorrow, I'd see Robert again. But this time, not to ask what my rights were. This time, to start reclaiming them. A soft knock, and then Emma on my doorstep. Eyes swollen, hair a mess. The kind of face that tells you a child has been carrying someone else's secret for too long. Grandma, can I come in? She asked, voice already frayed. I made tea, the cinnamon steaming up between us, and she sat down like she was stepping out of a storm. It wasn't a joke, she said without preamble. Mom planned it. She told Aunt Karen she wanted to humiliate you on purpose. She said once you were publicly embarrassed, Dad would stop feeling guilty and everything would fall into place. Her words landed like cold rain. I thought the post was cruel and thoughtless. It was worse. It was calculated. She handed me her phone and showed me messages, short, clinical texts that read like a blueprint. Posted the perfect thing today. Time to erase the old lady for good. David's too soft. Once Martha's humiliated, he'll stop feeling guilty. The screen blurred as Emma's tears fell. I don't want you stuck in the middle, I said, but she shook her head. I already am, she whispered. She told people at school you were desperate for money. They laughed. Then she reached across the table and took my hand. Grandma, I know what's right. I just wanted you to know I believe you. Her faith steadied something in me I hadn't noticed was trembling, the sense that I wasn't completely alone in this after all. 2 days later, Robert's voice on the phone was tight. Martha, David filed for adverse possession. My stomach dropped. He explained, 12 years of open occupancy, maintenance, an attempt to claim the property as theirs. Not likely to succeed here, he said, but it shows intent. And they've hired Margaret Stevens. Her retainer alone is $50,000. Before I could answer, Josh called. Grandma, come to Mom's office. I found something. 20 minutes later, he handed me a battered yellow folder scrawled M. Jenkins Strategy. Inside was everything. Bank statements, 3 mortgage applications using my name. Documents for Jenkins Property Management, LLC. Loan papers totaling more than $230,000, and a deed for a Florida condo. My signature was there, shakier than mine would ever be. Josh's voice was small. They used the house to get loans. They forged your signature. He pulled another page from the pile. She used your Social Security to open 6 cards. She recorded your calls to make you sound confused. I sat very still. The betrayal had a new shape now, paper and accounts and intentional acts. When Robert called back after reviewing the files, he said the words that made the room tilt. This is federal, fraud, identity theft, elder abuse. His question was simple. What do you want to do? I looked around the small apartment, the photos of Frank, the tea gone cold, and whispered to the quiet, no. Frank, I won't let them rot in prison. I'll let them rot in their own truth. That morning, Robert Patterson's office felt like a courtroom waiting for a verdict. The sky outside hung gray and heavy, the wind stirring the blinds as if even it sensed what was coming. I sat at the head of the oak table, Robert on one side, and Patricia Wells, the forensic accountant, on the other. The smell of old paper and coffee filled the silence. The door opened. David walked in first, pale and drawn, his blue suit wrinkled at the shoulders. Stephanie followed, dressed to impress, flawless makeup, expensive perfume, a designer dress meant to remind me of everything she thought she'd won. That same practiced smile, the one that used to disarm me, was back on her lips. I hope this means you've come to your senses, she said, smooth and smug. I met her eyes and smiled faintly. Oh, I've definitely come to my senses. Robert dropped a thick file onto the table. The papers hit the wood with a sharp, echoing thud, like a gavel striking truth. Patricia began opening each folder, her tone precise and cold. 3 forged mortgage applications totaling $230,000. 6 credit cards opened under Martha's name. Unauthorized withdrawals of $40,000 from the trust fund. And finally, proof of a condo purchased in Florida for $180,000. Silence swallowed the room. David's hands trembled in his lap, his knuckles white. Stephanie's smile faltered, but she kept her chin high. This is all a misunderstanding, David murmured weakly. I leaned forward. Is it? Then explain to me how you accidentally forged my signature 3 separate times. Stephanie's mask cracked. She slammed her hands against the table. You're a sick old woman trying to destroy your own family. By stealing $400,000 from me? My voice was calm, but the number hit her like a slap. Patricia slid another document forward. This shows the condo was purchased through Jenkins Property Management, the fake LLC. The funds came directly from the fraudulent loans. I turned to Stephanie. You didn't just steal money, I said quietly. You stole my name. She let out a hollow laugh. You're just lonely. Martha. You can't stand that your son built his own life. I met her gaze without flinching. I am lonely, I said, but at least I can live with my conscience. Can you? David crumbled, sinking into the chair, his voice breaking. Mom, please, I never meant for it to go this far. She said it was temporary, that we'd pay it back once the business took off. What business? I asked. The property management company. The fake one you used to launder stolen money? No one spoke after that. The only sound was Robert's pen scratching across the page, drawing the final line of the record, closing the chapter on the lies they thought I'd never see through. Robert placed another file on the table, his voice steady but low. Mrs. Jenkins has prepared an offer, he said. Full restitution of all stolen funds, immediate vacation of the house, dissolution of the fake company. In exchange, she will not press criminal charges. Stephanie's eyes went wide. You can't be serious. I folded my hands, calm and cold. Oh, I'm deadly serious, I said, because the alternative is prison. David's gaze lifted to mine, eyes wet and hollow. How long do we have to decide? Until 5 o'clock today, Robert replied without looking up. Silence filled the room, the kind that squeezes the air out of your chest. I watched my son, the man I had once carried in my arms, sitting across from me now like a stranger at trial. David, I said softly, do you remember when you were 8 and broke Mrs. Henderson's window? He blinked, startled. You said it was an accident. I told you lying would be a choice. We went over and apologized, he murmured, almost to himself. Yes, I said. You learned responsibility that day. What will you choose now? Stephanie turned sharply toward him. Don't sign it. David, we can fight this. But he wasn't listening anymore. His hand trembled as he reached for the pen. For a long second, I saw the boy he used to be, the boy who knew right from wrong before life made him forget. He pressed the pen to the paper and signed, We accept your terms, Mom. The sound of the pen scratching against the page was the only thing left between us. No raised voices, no victory, just the truth, cold, sharp, and absolute, sitting there like a blade on the table. When they left, the door closed quietly behind them. I turned to Robert. Did I do the right thing? He studied me over the rims of his glasses. You gave them a choice, Martha, he said, same as you did 35 years ago. I looked toward the window. Outside, the first snow of the season was falling, soft, white, and endless, covering the ground like a blank page waiting to be rewritten. 3 weeks later, the house was quiet again. The kind of quiet that didn't ache anymore. It simply breathed. Afternoon light spilled across the kitchen counter, warm and golden, glinting off the freshly polished wood. I poured myself a cup of coffee and watched the steam rise, curling into the air like a sigh released after too many years of holding my breath. The home that had once been taken from me felt whole again. The air smelled like peace, like soap, sunlight, and fresh beginnings. David and Stephanie had moved out a week ago. The Florida condo had been sold, every stolen dollar repaid, every fraudulent loan dissolved, every paper trail cleaned up. Robert said the file was officially closed, but I knew the wounds inside me weren't the kind that closed with signatures or settlements. Some scars simply become part of the story. A soft knock pulled me back from my thoughts. I opened the door to find Emma standing there, holding a small cardboard box in her arms. Forgot some things, she said, smiling shyly. I stepped aside to let her in. The box held a few photo frames, a coffee mug, and one of my old scarves, the blue one she'd borrowed last Christmas. How's your dad? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. Different, she said. Quieter. I think he's trying. There was no bitterness in her tone, just a fragile kind of honesty. I nodded. Sometimes you have to lose everything to remember who you are. She smiled at that, the kind of smile that makes you believe the next generation might turn out better after all. When she left, she paused at the doorway. Grandma, will you come for dinner on Sunday? Only if you promise to make your pot roast. I laughed, the sound light and unburdened. Deal. As the sun began to sink, I carried my tea to the porch. The wind had a chill, but it was gentle, playful. The maple tree out front swayed softly, scattering the last of its red leaves. I sat back in my chair, letting the quiet wrap around me like an old, familiar blanket. My phone buzzed beside me, a notification from a memory. It was a photo of Frank and me, taken at our 40th wedding anniversary. He was smiling, arm around my shoulders, eyes crinkled at the corners. The caption I'd written all those years ago appeared beneath it. Peace is when you sit beside someone who knows all your flaws but chooses to stay. For a long moment, I just stared at it. Then I clicked edit and changed the caption to something that felt truer now, after everything that had happened. Sometimes you have to fight for what matters most. Peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of justice. I hit post, and just like that, the very place where I had been humiliated became the place where I reclaimed my dignity. Notifications lit up one after another, old friends, neighbors, even people I hadn't spoken to in years. Proud of you, Martha. You're an inspiration. Integrity isn't negotiable. Each message landed softly, not as validation, but as quiet acknowledgement. Then I saw Emma's comment appear at the top. Love you, Grandma. Thank you for teaching us that integrity isn't negotiable. My eyes blurred, but this time not from pain. I set the phone down and listened, to the wind brushing through the porch, to the faint sound of a bird settling into its nest, to the kind of silence that finally feels earned. The house stood still, bathed in the soft gold of evening. It wasn't empty anymore. It was full of truth.